Good morning, everyone, and happy Tuesday. Today I want to talk a little bit about horses because I try and balance out my videos, but is a lot more information out there about cats and dogs and pet holidays. They're actually pretty much all about cats and dogs. Morning, Monica. So once in a while I like to talk about horses. For those who haven't seen my previous video on colic, that's basically what I want to talk about today. Yay, Monica! Because colic seems to be fairly misunderstood by a lot of people unless you've had horses for most of your life. So colic isn't actually a medical condition. It's a term used to describe abdominal pain. And there's actually 7 different types of colic, but because it's so common, it happens to between 4 and 10% of horses every single year, and many of the types are severely dangerous if they don't get treated right away. So I want to talk a little bit about those. The first and most common one is gas. Meaning that there's gas buildup in the intestines because they've either been eating a lot of food and not moving around. Typically, this is in horses that don't get a lot of exercise and they're just eating a lot. They tend to be a little bit overweight, and it results in a lot of flatulence. The second type is the intestinal cramps. It's called spasmodic colic. And basically the intestines are hypermobile, meaning they're moving around when they shouldn't be, because horses have far longer intestines than we do, obviously because they're much bigger. But their intestines are not supposed to move, and when they do, it's dangerous because sometimes it gets stuck and it can't move back. Impaction colic is probably one of the ones people are most comfortable with, because essentially they're eating and nothing's coming out. So it's a pretty obvious sign when your horse is constipated that it's possible that they have impaction colic. It's typically when partially digested food, also called roughage, builds up and blocks the intestines. So if they are not pooping for any species, dog, cat, bird, horse, whatever, that's really dangerous. So you need to make sure things are moving through. For typical dogs and cats, it's actually more common for them to get diarrhea. So do be careful that they're getting just the right amount of fiber, not too much, and not missing a lot of fiber, because I find a lot of pet diets tend to miss that one. Okay, number 4 is sand. So horses that live at farms that have a lot of sand or in sandier climates, this is when they're eating off of the ground and they ingest more sand, and it builds up in the curvatures of their intestines, especially because we know that the intestines aren't just one smooth tube, they're actually convoluted, meaning that there's wrinkles and dips and bends, because it basically increases the surface area for the body to absorb more nutrients, because the little cilia on the lining of the intestine is what absorbs the food. So the bigger the surface area, the more nutrients they can absorb because there's more space. But if the sand builds up, it can be quite dangerous because it's hard for them to pass it. So they essentially need extra water to make sure everything goes through. But sometimes the vets do have to clean out the sand, which can be very painful and expensive. 5 is displacement or entrapment, and it's a fairly uncommon type of colic. But essentially it's when the intestines move and can't move back. So it is a specific type. Basically, if it moves and can't move back, it's kind of like the slinky being pulled out and it can't come back. So all of the blood supply that's supposed to keep the intestines healthy and everything like that can't get to the stretched out part. So the rest of it is compressed. because it has extra blood now that can't get to the new part, and it can be very dangerous. Twisted gut is another one that's pretty common. In dogs, it's called bloat or torsion because it's basically when the intestines twist and they can't move back. If it twists on itself, that's called torsion. If it inverts and twists on itself, it's called intussusception, which is less than 4% of all colics, so it's not one of the more common types, but it is very dangerous because if the intestines are twisted, again, they start losing blood supply and part of the intestine can actually die, which is also common in the entrapment version of colic because if the blood isn't getting to that part of the intestine, the cells will slowly die and they may have to remove a large portion of the intestine. So do know the signs of colic because we have talked about them before and I have done another video about it talking more about the signs, so do go see. I believe it's on YouTube as well. The last type is strangulation. When the blood supply is cut off to a large part of the intestines and it results in the death of the intestinal wall. So a lot of these can occur together. They give them different names, but essentially if the intestines are blocked or not getting proper blood supply, or if they're moving where they shouldn't be, these are all really dangerous things. Obviously, if this happened in us, it would also be very dangerous. Maybe a little more noticeable in us if our intestines moved where they shouldn't be, because we know our bodies better than we can know the internal works of our horse. But there's also a mild form of colic, which doesn't have a determining cause. It's just they have some intestinal cramping, they walk around, their vet comes, and the horse is usually fine. There's actually 95% recovery from that one. But most of these are very dangerous because thousands and thousands of horses die every year from colic. Most experienced horse owners have had a horse that had colic and know what it's like, so they know what to expect, especially if you're living in a climate where it's fairly consistent. Here, not so much because we have seasons here. But make sure you know and you're constantly looking after your horses. Even if you have a barn staff, just to check them once in a while, especially when the horse's eating is becoming erratic. It's a really good sign. Because if they don't want to ingest food, it's probably because it's uncomfortable for them. It could be that their teeth need to be looked at. But I'd say probably half the time there's a digestive complaint. Maybe they're eating too much fiber. Maybe they need something else. Maybe the proportions of their food is off. But you know your horse is best, so do your best to keep an eye on them. That's all I have to say about the different types of colic. Again, the symptoms are in another video if you want to go check that out. I think that's all I have to say for today. There's another video on Friday. Let's see what it's about. Okay, I'm introducing a new type of video, I guess, where I'm going to have like an acupressure point or points of the month, just because I think people usually ask, well, what's this point good for? Or what's a point that works for this condition or this series of conditions or behavioral issues? So I thought we'd talk about that. So near the end of every month, there'll be a video about acupressure points you can use for certain issues. I believe the February one is for dental health and the heart, because it is dental month and heart month for February. So keep an eye out for that. The first one will be on the 31st. Monica asks, are different breeds more prone than others? I want to say yes. The easy keepers tend to process food more easily. They're less sensitive to things. So as long as they're getting the right amount of fiber, everything will pass through. But having the intestines twist is kind of chance almost. There are a couple of factors, but most horses are likely to get it in their lifetime if they're not well kept. Hope that answers your question. Okay. Have a fabulous rest of your week, and I will see you on the 31st on Instagram.